Chris Oatley's ArtCast, episode 76, an interview with Sarah Marino, background painter and visual development artist for Nickelodeon. Part 1. Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of Chris Oatley's ArtCast, the show that goes inside the hearts and minds of successful professional artists. I'm Chris Oatley. I was a visual development artist at Disney before I quit to start my own online art school, the Oatley Academy of Concept Art and Illustration. Find more art instruction and career advice from some of the most inspiring voices in animation, games, comics, and new media at chrisoatley.com. That's ChrisOatley.com. 2 years ago, my friend and Oatley Academy colleague, Sarah Marino, appeared on what is to date the most frequently downloaded episode of the ArtCast, The Rising Stars of Animation. Like every other guest on that show, Sarah has, as I predicted, gone on to great success. After rapping as a visual development artist on The Book of Life, the gorgeous new animated feature from Real Effects, she moved to Burbank, California to join the art department on Nickelodeon's new preschool series, Shimmer and Shine. In this episode, Sarah shares the story of her happy creative childhood, her positive experience at the Ringling College of Art and Design, and the subsequent disarming struggle of breaking into the animation industry. And in the Q&A segment, we respond to a listener question about developing your concept art portfolio. For those who are not familiar with the sort of abbreviated version of the story that you did on the Rising Stars episode 2 years ago, take us all the way back and just give us an idea of when you first got the sense that you could be a professional artist. When did you make that connection in your mind?
When I chose to go to Ringling, it was kind of like, yeah, I'm going to be an artist, but it wasn't, I don't know, like it didn't necessarily feel tangible, but it was all I really know how to do anyway. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to go to art school. That's what people do when they're really good at art. And it was really interesting being at art school because you're pulled in a lot of different directions. And you think to yourself, oh, maybe I'll do this with my work or I'll do that with my work. And you don't necessarily know how to focus what you're doing. And for me, I feel like it came more after I graduated where I realized, well, I mean, I always knew I want to be creative and work on stories and stuff, but I felt like I was confused a little bit on how I would get there. And I think graduation was a wake-up call because when you're in school, you're kind of like playing adult. You're not actually having to be an adult.
Right.
And then it was, oh crap, how do I actually make this my job moment for me? And I actually, after I graduated for a year and a half, I mean, I did freelance here and there, but I didn't have a career. So I think for me, that time period was essential because it helped me kind of figure out what really was important to me. What were the things that really like excited me? And that has always been telling stories. Even when I was a kid, I remember I would like make comics of my favorite characters or like in notepads or just try and like take the art project in school the extra mile and with storytelling. So for me, that was kind of in that year and a half post-graduation before I even got into the animation industry in production, not even art. That was kind of my soul searching, I would say, just figuring out to my core, like what made me really tick? Like what was it that I wanted to do? Besides being good at art, it was like, what did I want to say with it? And that led me to animation, which, like I said, I've always been a fan of animation. It was something I always knew I wanted to do, but I want to say like the realization of being an adult working in the field kind of hit me post-graduation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually had a similar experience in that I I went to art school with Disney. You know, I had the blinders on me. I was like laser focused on becoming a 2D, a pencil animator. And then that I've told that story numerous times on in various contexts, but that got derailed because the animation industry was melting down, and so I kind of threw me into this frenzy. But by the point I graduated, I didn't really know either, and I had kind of defaulted to freelance illustration, the sort of catch-all career focus, and I was not focused. And anyway, the point being, it was 2 years of struggle before, and when I say struggle, I mean, yes, financially, but not just that.
It's an internal struggle.
Exactly.
It's an inner turmoil. You feel like you're pulled in different directions. You're questioning why you went to school. Like, it's, I mean, it's so much self-doubt, and it's debilitating, and it's really hard to get out of it.
Yeah. So, and then, you know, the crappy day job, and you know, my day job wasn't crappy. It was exhausting. I actually really enjoyed working at the Guitar Center. I really I liked it a lot, but it was, oh my God, it was just long hours. And then, you know, Saturday, it was like your whole Saturday. You'd go into work at 7. Right. Opening took longer because, you know, Saturday was the big sales day. So you just did so much more prep and signage and everything. And then there's the long work day. You'd leave it after dark. And oh, man. Anyway, the point being, I had a similar thing where again, I've told the story 1,000 times, but, you know, that was the thing for me where I realized I have to tell stories. I don't have any. That's what's in my heart. And I have to go to the place where I can do that.
There were days where, like, I wouldn't get out of bed. I'd, like, sit and marathon Netflix. I wouldn't do art. Like, it was dark times. Like, it's not something that you just, like, instantly get out of. And I don't even remember, like, I don't think there was really an exact moment where I was like, like, I figured it out. Like, it was kind of this slow burn where I would talk to my friends that I went to school with, or at the time, Shane was working at Real Effects, so I had made some friends. I had done some freelance with Real Effects, but I wasn't full-time.
And who is Shane? I know who he
is. Shane is my partner in crime. He and I met in school at Ringling, and we're both currently working together. We always end up working at the same place.
Which is awesome.
So, yeah, we like it. Not everyone likes it, but we really dig it. So we get along, which is great. But yeah, so I had, you know, my art friends that I could, like, turn to or kind of talk about art. So it wasn't completely absent from my life. But there wasn't, I can't remember if there was ever an exact moment where I just kind of got my butt into gear. But it was slow. It didn't happen overnight. I was maybe occasionally working on a piece, and then I wouldn't touch it for a week. And then, like, I was like, oh yeah, I was working on that. And I would go back to it. And then it kind of just started snowballing, but it was slow. It didn't happen overnight.
Let's jump back to Ringling really quickly.
Sure.
You were drawn to storytelling. You had that kind of fire in your heart while you were in school, and you were sort of upgrading your own assignments and that kind of thing. Did you feel confident in your work? I mean, did you feel like, do you know what I mean? Like, did you actually feel like a brave artist? Did you feel, because if you were being that sort of, taking that much initiative and being that much of a sort of self-starter, I would think that you did, or at least that was not unfamiliar to you, confidence.
I think it was almost like a false confidence. If I had to paint a still life, I'd want to put something in it that was more than just like a piece of fruit, because I wanted to communicate something. So I remember we had to do a still life at one point, and I put like a weird baby doll head without an eyeball. I don't know. You know, it was just like this weird need to like have more to say, even if it was a little bit of a pretentious art school thing. So I would say that inclination was there, but I guess it worked out in the end. But I think that's what kind of pushed me towards, at first, I thought the answer was editorial illustration. Like, I have something to say.
Yeah.
So I need to talk about it in a piece that is in the New York Times. And there's nothing wrong with the people that do that, because they're brilliant. But for some reason, I thought that that's how that translated, to be respected artist that, you had to like be doing editorial magazine type stuff. And that kind of pulled me away from animation in just what I thought I was supposed to be pursuing. And this too was at Ringling. I was in illustration, which you can do a lot with it, but we were very separated from the computer animation program. So I never touched animation in school.
Wow.
It was very traditional. So you were working with media, doing still lifes, figure painting, things like that, which I'm very happy for. I have a very strong foundation. But I would say that those kind of assignments naturally kind of pull you away from the animation industry.
Yeah. Because
you're being surrounded by all these like amazing painters like Jeremy Lipking or Richard Schmid, and you're like, oh, I want to be that. And you kind of almost lose yourself in that part of the program. And I personally forgot kind of what really drove me as a kid. And that was, I loved Disney, I loved Don Bluth films, I loved anime and cartoons. And so that's where after graduating, the soul searching came in, and it was like, this is okay, but that's not what really, really ignites that passion in me. So
yeah. It's interesting. Yeah. The fundamentals unlock storytelling.
Absolutely. And you become so much more adept at conveying what you want to say. We can talk about school, which I know is one of your favorite topics, but my education was invaluable because it really focused on fundamentals, which I think was really important for me because the storytelling inclination was there. It was really getting my artistic ability to the level at which it needed to be to convey those stories, I think, was kind of what I got out of school.
I agree. The thing for me is, we have very similar opinions about our own art school experience, and I think for me, I try not to criticize my art school education because that's such a slippery slope, and it's easy for that to be interpreted as, well, all art schools are in the same, irrelevant, debilitating debt. It was relevant, and my experience was, and yes, there was plenty of debilitating debt. The point being, I think what you're getting at there is it would be better if traditional art schools, brick and mortar art schools, if generally speaking, there would be more synergy and it wasn't so departmental.
Oh, absolutely. Ringling was very, very departmental to the point where like we were not allowed to take classes in computer animation. Yeah. And it was frustrating because especially I'm just bringing up Shane again. He always wanted to be in animation and he wanted to take those classes and he couldn't. And I think that's really a fault of just the collegiate education system because you can't categorize art like that.
Especially now.
Yeah, exactly. When there's so much crossover, it's crazy. And especially with digital apps and media, it's so important to be able to dip your toes into all these different places. Yeah. And like I said, Ringling was great for me, but it was definitely frustrating to see some of my friends not be able to take the classes that they wanted to take.
Right. This is what Noah Bradley and I were ranting about last summer, in what we referred to as the death of freelance illustration as we know it. If the word illustration at your school means editorial illustration in the sort of 80s and 90s idiom, that is a problem. Right. Illustration is still a valuable term. It's an incredibly valuable term. It just has to be a far more versatile term now. Sure. Because otherwise we're in trouble.
And Ringling, if you wanted to pursue other things, you had to be very self-motivated.
Exactly. Betsy Bauer was talking about on the Rising Stars episode. She was talking about how she kind of was stuck, and so to draw, she was on the animation track, and she wanted to do visual development and character design, and so she had to find time to sketch in her own classes. And it's like, wait a second, you're in school.
Exactly. Animation only had one or two semesters of figure drawing, and then they stopped. Whereas illustration, we had figure drawing all the way till senior year. Or figure painting. So it was really frustrating as a student to feel limited by kind of the machine of the college. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's definitely where things like, Oatly Academy or, Concept Design Academy or whatever come into play. It just gives you that extra education that you might need. Shane, he had roommates that happened to be computer animators, so he would sit down with them and they would show him stuff in Maya, or they would talk about, their assignments, and they would swap knowledge, and they would try and sneak into each other's classes. Yeah. And you did what you had to for what you were passionate about. But in general, we had a very traditional illustration program. And by traditional, I mean editorial, right. Or like Hallmark cards. That was kind of the bulk of what we did. And, computer animation, Betsy was saying, like, was all about Maya. It was all about computer animation. And it's frustrating as a student to find your way when the opportunities aren't necessarily there at your school.
Because you had to commit before you had to get married before you dated.
Exactly. And for me, I really would have benefited from being able to take a visual development class or a 2D animation class, because I feel like that would have opened my eyes from the kind of traditional mindset that I had. Yeah. And, there's a few people like Shane or Betsy that kind of knew from the get-go, but not everyone knows. And that's okay, too. But that's why having a broad education is so important, because you need to be exposed to things to know what you like and what you don't like, even more what you don't like. Yeah. Because that helps you narrow down really quick what you don't want to do.
It's interesting also on the Rising Stars episode how everybody kind of had this perception that to be in animation meant you were an animator. And that's a perfect example of that. Even the specific world that you might be drawn to is much bigger than you realize.
Absolutely. I would say that idea, it comes from the childlike perception. I talked about, I remember Rising Stars, like I wanted to be a Disney animator. That was the thought, when you're 8 years old, that's what you thought it was. Right. You didn't realize how many people there were. There were cell painters, there were color stylists, there were background painters, there was production. Like you don't even know about these things. And you just assume that it's the making things move part is what you're supposed to do.
Beauty and the Beast was single-handedly created by Glenn Keane.
Yeah, exactly. I just remember I think it was when my mom took me, it was at the time when Orlando still was making movies at Disney there. Right. And I remember her taking me through the tour. And they were working on, I want to say Emperor's New Groove. I think that was one of the last ones they worked on there. And I remember seeing there was still some traditional cell painting happening and background painting you could kind of observe as you walked through. And I was like, whoa, there's so much more happening than I even thought. Because you normally just see the guy drawing the 3 circles and making Mickey Mouse. Like you don't think of it as this kind of team effort.
Were you an artistic kid?
Yeah, I was. I really was drawn to animated movies. I remember one of my first kind of early memories was seeing Beauty and the Beast in theaters. Oh, yeah. And I remember going to see Lion King and Hunchback. Like those things really impacted me as a kid. And I had a very large, puffy VHS tape collection of all the different Disney and Don Bluth films. Do you remember those cases?
The puffy VHS tapes. That's awesome.
So I had a large one of those. And then actually, I would say one of the big turning points for me outside of just the Disney animator idea was also when I saw Sailor Moon on Cartoon Network. That was huge for me because it was a cartoon that I actually related to. I watched Nick cartoons. I watched Doug and Our Real Monsters and all that, and I really enjoyed them. But for me, anime was this whole other world where I started watching Miyazaki films. So, we'd rent them from Blockbuster back when Blockbuster was a thing, the tiny anime section. And that kind of opened my eyes to more of what animation could be. Besides just the typical Disney Don Bluth idea that we have as kids, which it's nothing wrong with that. Right. But for me, anime was a huge eye-opener to storytelling with that as a medium, not just as a genre. Right. So for me, anime was a huge motivator.
So connect the dots for me. Why Ringling? How did you end up there? What was that like?
I moved around a lot as a kid. I lived on the East Coast. My dad kind of corporate climbed through Time Warner Cable. I ended up in Florida for high school. And Ringling came to my school to recruit probably, I mean, they did it every year, but they were in one of my art classes sophomore year. That kind of opened my eyes to that there were schools that you could learn art. Like that's a thing. I remember kind of starting to do research. The internet was still kind of new. But my sister, who's a few years older than me, started looking into colleges. And I was like, I want to look at colleges too. I started finding, Cal Arts and RISD and all these other big name places. And at the time, my parents, which I'm thankful for, but they were very much like, you go to college. That's what you do. You get a degree. We will support you if you go to college. If you don't go, you can figure your life out without our financial help, which I'm thankful for because I think college was a very valuable experience for me. So I always had Ringling in the back of my mind, but I was definitely researching other schools. And I applied to SCAD and SVA. I toured SCAD and I toured Ringling because Ringling held the portfolio day for high school students, which if you're a high school student is invaluable. You should definitely go.
It's like portfolio reviews or?
Yeah, they do portfolio reviews and you can kind of go around to all different booths that have all different colleges and programs represented. I've actually worked National Portfolio Day a few times for Ringling. They reach out to alumni to represent them in different areas.
Cool.
I think as a high school student, that was really big for me, was being able to talk to current college students and recruiters in person to really get a sense of the school, especially if you can't visit before you choose to attend. I went with my mom and we kind of talked to the Ringling people. And then I actually did pre-college at Ringling. Pre-college was like a 4 or 5 week program where you lived on campus, you took classes, you got a college credit. It kind of solidified that I wanted to go to Ringling.
Yeah.
I just was really drawn to the school. The work that comes out of it is obviously very impressive.
Stellar.
And I had the benefit of being a Floridian in high school. I got a lot of Florida-based scholarships that even though Ringling was a private school, applied to Ringling,
Nice.
like applied to my tuition. So financially, Ringling made the most sense. So that's kind of what led me there. Being a Floridian helped, but also just the experience of talking to the recruiters touring the school. I did a lot of research and it seemed like a good place for me.
Yeah.
It was the one where I felt the most comfortable.
Yeah. You said that you, as a kid, you drew all the time. What did you draw?
I drew a lot of Sailor Moon.
Mm-hmm.
There was a period for probably 2 to 3 years where that was all I drew. Mm-hmm. And I would make my own original characters and I would put them in my own comic books. And my sister and I would write stories about them and we would act them out and come up with, I didn't even realize at the time I was storyboarding animation transformation sequences. That was kind of my for fun thing to do because I was so into it. I definitely was the typical nerd that just drew like Zelda and Sailor Moon and just thought it was the greatest stuff ever. And I still think it's the greatest stuff ever. So not much has changed.
Yeah, that's great. I was just thinking that actually. It's like, how times have changed.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, you kind of have to think about the stuff that really drives you.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what's led me to a magical girl show at Nickelodeon.
Yeah.
You got to follow the things that really excite you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So for me, it was definitely, I definitely started off drawing Disney and just, my parents or whatever. And then Sailor Moon, though, was, I feel like, the big motivator where I drew all the time. I still have all the journals at my parents' place just tucked away in my closet.
Wow.
Yeah, I should bust those out sometimes. They're pretty embarrassing.
That's awesome. So it was something about Sailor Moon that was a real catalyst for, so some sort of mixture of story elements, it sounds like, and character.
Yeah, I think it was a lot of things. I feel like there was, the storytelling in television, which I had never really seen before. Because, a feature film, it was finite. You saw your hour and a half movie and you were done. And for Sailor Moon, especially at the time when it was still airing, it was new content. It was a continuous story and things happened to the characters. And I remember playing Ninja Turtles and Power Rangers as a kid and drawing those things, but they didn't speak to me. And definitely as a female, I was drawn to just the fact that these are girl characters doing the things that boy characters normally do. And they look pretty doing it and they do it well. Those kind of ideas were not really happening in American cartoons. Right. She was a princess, but she was like kicking ass and saving the guy. Right. So it was like completely swapped, which I just blew my mind as a kid. That has definitely motivated my work even now. I mean, I draw a lot of female characters because that's what really speaks to me. And they're not over-sexified and they're strong, beautiful characters or women because there's so much more that they have to say. Not to get on my feminist rant, but you know, it was not what you normally saw in American animation. So, and now you definitely see it. I mean, we have Korra and we have so many other strong, I mean, Frozen even. This is like a new age of animation for females, which is amazing. The creator of my show at Nickelodeon is the first female show creator. That's crazy in a great way and an awful way.
Exactly. Okay, so it was a Ringling, and then there were two. What did you say? 2 years of sort of ambiguous, or was that my story? Was 2 years of ambiguous?
Mine was a year and a half, but yeah, it was definitely in the ambiguous. Oh God, what do I do now? Kind of.
Right. Now, was there any? I mean, did you? But there had to be some sense of, you know, what were you trying? Like, what were you experimenting with or drawing? Or, I mean, what, and how did that change from day one at Ringling?
Senior thesis, let's start there. I did book stuff. I did book covers, but it wasn't the book cover stuff I do now, which is middle grade children's book. It was very serious, you know, classic literature kind of stuff. Basically geared towards editorial illustration.
Well, that's interesting. The story's sneaking up on you.
Absolutely,
You're still focused on the affect, but but the storytelling is still bubbling up underneath.
Yeah, exactly. So the focus it was almost like I was doing what I thought I was supposed to be doing. And I don't mean this in a knock on the Illustration Academy because it was a wonderful program, but I took the Illustration Academy twice. I attended it twice when it was hosted at Ringling during the summertime. And that had a huge influence on me because that was all about editorial illustration. And I was like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. That's it. So that's what I focused my thesis on. And then I graduated and I went to Richard Solomon art agency representatives.
Nice.
Yeah, I did an internship there for a couple months in New York City, which was very cool experience.
Oh, that's so cool. Well, CF Payne was one of my teachers at CCAD. CF
Payne. Yeah, he taught me at Illustration Academy.
Are you serious? Oh my God, that's awesome. Oh, I love it. We were just discussing getting him on the show, so we're going to have him on.
He's a wonderful human being. So that was a really interesting experience because that was my first exposure to the business side of kind of what happens. Like I would hear Richard on the phone negotiate contracts. Honestly, most of my time was spent gathering contacts and putting them in Excel spreadsheets, typical intern stuff. But I was like a fly on the wall and I got to hear everything. So that was a really interesting experience. And then after that, I moved back home and Shane ended up getting the apprenticeship at Real Effects. And so there's literally nothing in Tampa, Florida that had anything to do with what I wanted to do. So I decided to pack up my bags and move to Dallas because I had been talking with Real Effects a little bit in the sense of they knew who I was and that I was interested. They knew that my portfolio was liked. So it was this weird kind of, we don't have a position now, but maybe we will relationship. And so I moved out there because I was going to be sitting on my butt working on stuff at my parents. I may as well move in with Shane and try and build out our network in Dallas.
Well, and you get to go to lunches or they're just if you're just around, then you're around.
And it was also halfway to LA. So
stop number one.
It was the middle of the country. So getting from Florida to LA is not really easy. So it was kind of something that Shane and I talked about. It would save us both money moving in together because we'd split rent and all the good things that come from having a significant other to share an apartment with. And so like you said, being around it was actually a very good thing for me because they ended up, I want to say I was out there for maybe 3 or 4 weeks and I got called in to work on a freelance, like a freelance pitch. Yeah. And I ended up, my first assignment out of school was on a Charmin Bears toiletry pitch. And I was literally painting toilet paper bits on the butt of a rendered bear. So that's my, big break. So you really can't, you never know what your first job out of school is going to be. So
that is the greatest story I've ever heard.
Yeah. And, that only lasted a few weeks and it was a one-time freelance thing. And then I ended up doing a few other freelance jobs for them. But they were, every month or every couple of months and they weren't consistent. I'd be in for like a week or a couple days. So it wasn't like a full-time thing. It was enough to get by, but barely. The days that I wasn't in-house freelancing, those were the days that I laid in bed and marathoned Lost. Yeah. Sure. And my portfolio though, I mean, what are you going to do with Charmin Bears?
Right. So wait, hang on.
Yeah.
Hang on. What was that handout like? How does someone pitch you this gig? So, okay, Sarah, we need maybe 18 or 20 bits of toilet paper.
Yeah.
To just kind of encircle.
Oh.
To festoon the bear's butt.
If only I could tell you the spot idea I storyboarded. It wasn't my idea. I had to do it for the agency, and it was terrifying.
Oh, my.
So I don't think I can talk about it. But it was, it definitely involved candles and mood music and a bathroom. So,
oh, my. Wow.
There's only so much of that you can put in a portfolio.
Right. Exactly. Oh my. Was it awkward though? Was it an awkward?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Because how do you have that? I know it's a bear, but how do you have that conversation?
You kind of look at the script and then you look at the guy handing it to you and you kind of smile and you just wait for him to kind of say, I know, but he doesn't. Yeah. And then you just feel awkward because you're just wondering if it's you. So, I mean, it was definitely a valuable experience. It was my first time trying to figure out how to invoice, which the Graphic Artists Guild handbook was super essential there. I remember when they asked me what my rate was, and I was just like, what do I say? And I gave them a range, and it was a really ridiculously low range. Oh, God. I didn't know. I was just straight out of school. I was like, $15 to $20 an hour. I don't know. And he was like, okay, we'll do 20. And I was like, oh my God, he gave me the higher end. Oh. Little did I know.
Jackpot.
So, I mean, I definitely made my early freelance or just early like career mistakes.
Right.
In that situation, but they were super nice and it was a really great experience for me just having something out of school. Though part of the problem was after I would work for them, I would hear, which I feel like this is a trap that a lot of people who might be freelancing fall in or just looking for jobs. You hear, we'll call you soon, or we'll have this thing soon, or we'll pick you up to do this in like a month or in a couple weeks. And then you're waiting and then you don't hear anything. And you're kind of left there like, wait, are they ever going to call me? And then a little more time goes by and then I didn't hear anything. And that was kind of where the cycle of what am I doing was fed into. Because I was like, oh, God, they hate me. They're not calling me for stuff, which, my friends on the inside were like, oh, no, they just right now we're okay. It wasn't a personal thing, but that's where the debilitating self-doubt kind of feeds in is why aren't they calling me back?
I should have added an extra piece of toilet paper to the bear butt. I knew it.
Seriously.
I knew I should have added that 23rd flick.
Yeah. So, that was a really, it was a good learning experience time for me.
Yeah, no kidding. And this is interesting, though. It's interesting that you were dealing with all of this self-doubt and you were sort of going there into the mental spiral, even after all of these validations.
Sure, absolutely. Because self-doubt's even there, and I'm working at a major studio. I don't think it ever goes away as an artist. But I definitely feel like the unemployment self-doubt, there's something very, very upsetting about that.
Right. When you're not going into the gig and doing the meetings and that kind of thing, and things just stop.
Right. I mean, when you don't know what you're supposed to be doing the next day.
Yeah.
And then you stay in bed all day and binge watch Netflix. That's where I feel like the self-doubt as an artist really can eat away at you almost as a person.
Yeah.
And that's just something that I'm prone to that kind of stuff. Some people are more prone to feeling depressed, and I happen to be one of those people. So I can get really into my headspace, really overthink things and overanalyze, and getting out of that, I definitely didn't do on my own. And that's something that's really important, is having the network of friends, whether it be online or in person or family or whomever, who's
circle of trust.
Absolutely. Who not only is building you up, but also being truthful with you.
Yeah.
About where you are, what you need to do. Because thank God I had Shane and my friends, because they were there to tell me, Sarah, your work's good. Yeah. But maybe you're not getting the job because XYZ, rather than just blindly saying, oh, you're so wonderful, I don't know why they're not hiring you. It was more like, hey, maybe you should take out some of the editorial stuff if you're trying to get a job at a studio. Like it was constructive, which finding the people that do that for you is really, really important. And it really helped me. And it didn't happen. Yeah. They were saying these things and I didn't always take their advice right away, but hearing those things from them, it starts to build you back up. Some people can do this kind of soul searching on their own. I can't. And I'm forever grateful to the people that have been through those dark times for me, because I wouldn't be here today without them.
So how did the dark times finally come to an end?
Well, long story short, Real Effects knew of me and liked my work, and they were like, oh, we want to hire you for Freebirds. This was back when the movie was called Turkeys. This was a long time ago. And that just didn't pan out because the budget wasn't there. There's a director change. If you kind of look on the internet, you can read about it. They were looking out for me, but if the budget isn't there, they can't hire you. Luckily, I had a relationship with them just by I would come in for lunch or, the occasional freelance or whatever. And they finally called me one day. We have a PA position. We know it's not art, but, we're looking for a PA that needs to start right away. And we'd like to interview you. This was literally, I had filled out the application online for my local Apple store because I was like, this is it. I just need to work retail.
Right.
It was the same week that I was filling that out. And I was like, you know what? Wow. I'm just going to do this interview and hopefully get the job. And I did. The PA job for me was my entry. And it was also one of the biggest learning experiences for me.
Oh, yeah.
Because one thing about Real Effects being a smaller studio, I was brought in to work on the Ice Age Christmas special, which is like a 22-minute
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that.
A Mammoth Christmas that aired on Fox later that year, Fox TV. Yeah, so that was my first gig. And because Real Effects is working on a much smaller scale than feature, I had the unique opportunity to be a general PA. So I wasn't a PA for just one department. I was PAing for the entire pipeline. So I was really exposed to a lot of the studio happenings and the 3D side, which, as we talked about at Ringling, I was not exposed to. So I really got to understand Maya, not from like a I can do it myself standpoint, but what do they need from me as an artist standpoint, like the modelers and the texture artists and everything. So that time being around other talented, knowledgeable people in different areas, absolutely huge. So, not everyone's path into animation is the same, but I think being a PA is one of the most humbling, wonderful experiences you can do. Even when you're out in the rain getting a hot dog for a higher up, or stacking chairs or connecting phone calls, that kind of experience, if you think about it, most people in the workplace have gone through something like that.
Oh, yeah.
They don't end up as a head honcho or a supervisor overnight. They, started from the ground up. You have to start somewhere. So for me, that was a really great experience. And luckily, I was pretty good at it because I just happened to catch on pretty quickly, I suppose. And they ended up promoting me to an assistant coordinator towards the back end. And then I was brought back as a full-time coordinator for the Despicable Me Minion Mayhem ride, which is at Universal Orlando and Hollywood. That was done at Real Effects. And I started coordinating the asset departments for them on that project, which, at the time, Freebirds was in full production. A bunch of my friends were in the art department working on that. And because Freebirds wasn't ready to hit the CG pipeline, Real Effects was working on the Despicable Me ride before production on Freebirds was supposed to begin. So I worked even more closely with the asset department, which, again, as a Viz Dev artist now, that's huge. Because I got to hear all the grievances from the modelers and the textures artists about what they wish they had in the concept art. And I was just kind of mentally taking notes like, oh, you don't like this or you like that or whatever. And that was really important to me, too, because I also made a lot of really close friends who were rooting for me, who weren't just artists. They were supervisors, because when you're a coordinator, you're working directly with supervisors. It's a really great way to network with people that have a lot more influence than just the average artist. Networking with people outside of your kind of social circle or age demographic is really big because they're the people that kind of help with hiring decisions.
Okay, so today's question comes from Shane. Not the same Shane. A different Shane.
So many Shanes.
Yeah,
what are we gonna do?
It's raining Shanes.
Oh no.
Shane's question pertains to concept art portfolio submissions, and he says, I know there has been a huge blur between concept art and promotional illustration in recent years, but when putting together a portfolio for concept work, is it better to have more polished promo pieces or more loose design sketches? I guess I could throw in model sheets too. I'm assuming it's best to cover all bases if possible, but I thought I'd ask if there was anything specific that may showcase appealing skills/work more so than others.
If you're trying to get like book cover work, model sheets aren't going to go very far.
Right.
They're going to be really confused. So I would say it's just tailoring your portfolio to the job that you're applying for, or organizing your site in a way that is separated into different sections so they can easily navigate what they're looking for, they being the prospective employer. So, for instance, on my website, I have an illustration section and a visual development section because my agent actually requested this because I actually use my website more for applying for book jobs. So I needed to make sure that my site had all of the pieces that applied to book cover work front and center in a section that was separated from my character modeling and prop stuff. The job you're applying for, what the employer is looking for, a lot of times this is very articulated in the website. Yeah. They'll say straight up what they want. If they say they want figure drawing, then have a section on your site, which I have on mine called Sketchbook. And within that, I kind of dump like weird different explorations of drawings, or I think I have a few watercolor looking pieces, which has actually gotten me work where the publisher has seen it and they're like, what's this style? This applies to what I'm looking for. If you're not very strong at doing model sheets, I wouldn't include them because that's something you need to work on. And what's going to happen is an employer is going to look through your work and they're going to see these weaker things and they're going to be like, this person isn't as reliable as I thought. Even if it had nothing to do with what you were applying for, they're going to see it and start questioning your ability. That's where it gets problematic. So having a person kind of check you, I think is helpful, whether that's on the forums or at Oatly Academy or a friend or whomever. For me, it's definitely helpful to have someone there to be honest with my work and say, I wouldn't really put that up, or maybe you should do this before you put it up, or I wouldn't include it. So having that kind of objective third party to give you feedback before you apply, I think is really important.
Yeah, I wait usually a week before I put anything on DeviantArt or on my website, any new work anymore. And part of that is because I have so many other things going on. In fact, when we were hanging out in Burbank just a couple weeks ago, Natalie Hall, who was also on the Rising Stars of Animation podcast, said to me, she was like, so you gonna post any personal work anytime soon?
Natalie is like the queen of posting every hour.
I know, she's amazing. Yeah, she's like, so I haven't seen any personal work from you recently, Chris. I'm like, I know, but I actually do have some paintings. But anyway, the point being, this is not about me. This is about Shane. And so there, I guess that's advice. I don't know if it's advice or not. It's just what I do. I wait, and then the pieces that need to go up stay in my mind. They keep tickling my brain, and I'm like, okay, that one really does need to go public.
Exactly.
But then specifically about concept art, that is actually, to me, I don't know, I would assume your opinion is similar, Sarah. That is actually one of the easiest jobs to figure out what to put in the portfolio for, because there are so many concept art books available to buy. So you can go and see literally how they made the movie. And in fact, there's actually
the game.
Or the game. Exactly. There's a post on chrisoatley.com, and I believe it's just chrisoatley.com/concept-art-books, but it's my personal top 10 favorite concept art books, and you can get some great examples of some to go order. But it's all there. That's what the Art of Robots, the Blue Sky film, is actually a fantastic example, because that book is really comprehensive. It's not just the super loose, beautiful, sexy kind of concept art. There's plenty of that in there, but there's a lot of the mechanics kind of concept art, the functional concept art that Sarah and I were talking about earlier, where, when we say you got to make the movie, there's a lot of that in there. That to me is one of the best books for really showing what it's really like to work on an animated feature.
I think the most important thing to take away is your portfolio needs to be geared towards the job you're applying for. And so if you want to work on feature films, looking at the art of books for feature films is like the basic answer is, this is the kind of work that I need to be doing, and I would be doing at my job every day. Now, I will say something kind of as a side note to take from that is generally in the art of books is the prettiest, most wonderful paintings.
Right.
And I think a harsh reality that I've seen for some people, which actually was helpful when I was a PA to see this side, is you don't always do the most glamorous paintings or the most awesome drawings. You do a lot of assets and characters that aren't going to visually excite you the way that the stuff that they put in the art of book does, but that's part of the job. And not everything that you draw at your job is going to be the most awesome thing ever. And you can make it as awesome as you want in your own head, but the whole point of the job is you're trying to make a movie, which is greater than just the assets that you're working on. They have to be able to work within the entire scope of the movie. So if you're working on something that isn't a hero prop, it's not going to make it into the art of book, but it's an essential part of the movie making process. So I've seen that with people that come in to the studios without very much experience. They're like, well, why am I not working on the stuff that I see in the art of books? It's like, well, you get to do that every once in a while. Right. So just, the art of books don't always show the nitty gritty. Like they don't always show the texture call outs, which you'll do a lot of, or the orthographic turnarounds, which you do a lot of.
Oh yeah.
So they'll show them for the main characters, but there's a lot of side characters that need that love too.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good point. That's how you stay employed. That's
absolutely
when they say that the movie took 4 years, it's because everybody was doing that stuff.
Absolutely.
It's like, yeah, sure. You get there's the blue sky phase at the beginning where you're just like everybody's having fun and you're coming up and brainstorming and joking around, and that's all great. But then year 3 of the film is like, changes.
You want to work on more generics?
Exactly. Yeah. Costume color shifts and just all kinds of crazy stuff.
In the grand scheme of things, it's still fun. You're working on cartoons.
Oh, yeah.
But it's not like the glamour shot.
Right.
You have to be able to work on the things that aren't necessarily going to be in the art of book. So taking the art of book and pulling the parts of it and looking at the film and seeing the kind of work that is featured in that book, and then figuring out what you can do to emulate that with your own work is really important, because your portfolio will then, when it's shown to an HR person or a hiring person, which 99% of the time is who's looking at your portfolio first before an artist, they're going to see that you fit the little checkbox on their Excel spreadsheet to being able to fulfill that position.
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, and on the note of loose and polished, of course, do both.
Absolutely.
For a concept art portfolio specifically, do loose stuff and polished stuff.
Yeah, so like color keys are super loose. So it's a great idea if you want to do color to explore a sequence and how the color shifts look. And there's that really awesome Pixar book that's only color keys.
The Art of Pixar.
Yeah, the Art of Pixar Color or something.
And then it's like color scripts from 1995 to present or whatever.
The Incredibles ones are insane.
Oh, yeah.
You don't have to do that with your color script. But it's a good place to start when you're looking at paintings that aren't necessarily polished. It's like, if I can convey mood and story and lighting in a really quick hour to 2 hour painting, that's a really great thing to include. And maybe on your portfolio, on your website, you include an entire sequence of several of these, as opposed to having a separate page for each one, because they're quick studies, but they convey something greater than just one can say in a way. And then you have, your more completed polished pieces, which are lighting keys or the piece that hangs in the CEO's office or whatever. So, no big deal. It's really important to have a range if your capabilities are highlighted by that range. If you're really, really good at one thing, then do that thing really, really well, and you'll still get work.
If you have a question that you would like for me to answer on the ArtCast, go to chrisoatley.com/contact. In this episode, Sarah talked about how she lacked a clear picture of her future as a professional artist until a few years after she graduated from art school. How clear is your own vision of the beginning or the next stage of your creative career? How can I help you through this show and through my blog make progress? Please help me to continue to create content that empowers and equips you on your creative journey by sharing your response in the comments at chrisoatley.com/Sarah-Marino. Again, that's chrisoatley.com/Sarah-Marino. In the next episode of the ArtCast, Sarah discusses her parallel career as a YA illustrator and talks more about her work at Real Effects and Nickelodeon. You might have heard that Sarah will be offering mentorship sessions for students in my digital painting course called The Magic Box. And so if you are interested in having Sarah Marino as your creative mentor, go to chrisoatley.com/Sarah-Marino for more information. If you are an intermediate digital painter or a beginner who likes to learn quickly by being thrown into the deep end, then I encourage you to enroll in the very first digital painting course offered by the Oatley Academy of Concept Art and Illustration. In true Oatly Academy fashion, it has a snappy title. It's called The Magic Box: Everything I Know About Digital Painting. In The Magic Box, I will show you every workflow, every technique, every time saver, everything I have developed over my past 8 years of professional digital painting experience, including my time as a visual development artist at Disney. The Magic Box will empower and equip you to paint lifelike human and animal characters, to control color, light, and atmosphere, to achieve a professional level of polish and dimension in your work, to avoid overworked paintings and the flat coloring book look forever, to increase your speed and efficiency with versatile techniques that will work in any painting. And of course, to break through the overwhelm of working in Photoshop. Plus, you'll have access to a huge community of passionate, focused artists with whom you can connect and collaborate. So if you want a clear step-by-step method designed specifically for concept artists and illustrators, head to chrisoatley.com/magicbox and enroll today. It's completely risk-free, and you get instant access to the first set of lessons as soon as you enroll. Here are just a few testimonials from current Magic Box students. @John Acuna says, "At Chris Oatley, those lighting tutorials helped me make a major breakthrough today. 2 days of work done in as many hours. Thanks." @Frederick_S says, "First time I've looked at a painting I've done and not wanted to scrap it ASAP. Thanks, @Chris Oatley." @Thousandfold Art says, @Chris Oatley, that less lesson changed my life, dude. #MagicBox. And @Drake Studio says, "The Magic Box courses from @Chris Oatley have made me question my entire digital art workflow. The learning, it hurts. Hurts so good." I love you guys. Yes, so head to chrisoatley.com/magicbox to learn more, to enroll, and we would love to see you join the Oatley Academy.